items should sign in before the meeting starts on the form on the board table, or tonight it is over to the side. The board requests a discussion time limit of 3 minutes on any specific agenda item. And we ask that visitors to make only one appearance per item. Only one item tonight. We ask those addressing the board to speak from the podium and state their name and address. Board policy 0167.3 dictates that personnel issues will not be addressed. Concerns about individual employees of the district should be brought to the superintendent or designee. The meeting site is fully accessible. Any person requiring further accommodation should contact the superintendent at the school corporation central office. As is our custom, we begin our time together with a word of prayer. Mr. Parks, could you do that for us, please?
Heavenly Father, I just thank you for this opportunity for this board and this community to come together today to discuss the plans for this school corporation. Lord, may we all remember to keep the kids first, the next generation first. Lord, also right now as we are on the eve of the terrible acts of 20 years ago, may we not forget, and may we not forget the unified body that this nation became, and may we seek to do that during these difficult situations as well. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. Okay, I'll now call this meeting to order. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, roll call. We have 4 members present. Unfortunately, Mrs. Jones would really have liked to have been here this evening, but she is feeling ill, so she is excused tonight. We do still have a quorum. Mission statement, Mr. Parks.
Lebanon Community School Corporation will cultivate and reach every student by influencing and enriching their lives through the power of education, and to do so in a positive and safe learning environment.
Thank you very much. All right, item 2, LCSC COVID data and information. Dr. Miller,
Thank you, Ms. Keith. I think I can connect to the screen, yes? Or are you doing that for me, Mr. Martin? Am I doing Apple TV, or how am I doing that tonight?
Apple TV is ready, but I'm not.
All right. I see it over there.
Down here.
Does that work? It's on the screens back there, but not up here. I think the folks back there can see it, so at least up here can. So thank you. We'll get these things rolling for you so you can see the screen. Board, I believe you have the packet in front of you as well. First, wanted to take a moment to thank everyone for their correspondence and information that they've shared with me and the board over the last several days. I've appreciated the civility of those exchanges, and been able to exchange a lot of information with many in our community. So I just wanted to thank you for that, and appreciate that there's a lot of opinions this evening, and I've just appreciated the manner in which folks have shared their thoughts with me. So I want to go through just some information this evening. Some of it's new, some data from yesterday as well, just to give you a look into our current situation as it relates to COVID-19. I first wanted to spend some time on a response to a few questions that I've received over the last several days. One, I'd like to address a recent news article that stated that at least one of our schools was missing data from the State Department of Health database, and there was a suggestion that we had not submitted our COVID-19 information to the Department of Health. I was quite surprised when I received that information from the media, and I was not very pleased actually at that time as well. I went directly to Mr. Martin's office so I could find out what was happening. And we, in fact, had reported the data several days prior to that. In fact, we report it every week. So I just wanted to reassure our families and community that we have followed all of the requirements as far as reporting goes to the State Department of Health and have stayed up to date on that. We reached out to the Department of Health immediately, and I think within 24 hours they had corrected that and had our information up there. So I just wanted to take a second and address that. The other item was received questions about symptomatic students who have COVID-19 symptoms and why some of our data does not delineate between symptomatic and positive. From the quarantine standpoint, they're treated the same. It's a 10-day quarantine. You can return. Now you can return with a rapid test, which is a change that's happened in the last few weeks, which has been a very positive for us to get both students and staff back to school quickly. If someone is symptomatic from a COVID-19 protocol standpoint, they're assumed positive until that negative test is there. So I just wanted to address that. Received a couple questions about that as well. Unvaccinated symptomatic students versus vaccinated, there's been some questions about that as well. Again, from the protocol standpoint, symptomatic is the same. It's 10 days, negative test, or the 10 days runs its course, no symptoms, return to school. I will share with the board and community that of all of our positive students and staff to date, we've had 2 students who were positive and vaccinated out of the total number of reported positives. We've had 1 staff member that was vaccinated and positive out of the total staff. So happy to share that information. 2 students, 1 staff that was vaccinated and a positive in all the data. So obviously a very, very low number and tracks with both state and national data on that front. And then contact tracing versus quarantine, just wanted to take a second to talk about that just for a moment. It's kind of unfortunate that the terms contact tracing and quarantine have somehow become synonymous. So there's been some confusion about that. If, for example, if you are a vaccinated individual and deemed to be a close contact to a positive COVID-19 case, you are still contact traced. You are still a close contact to a positive COVID-19 case. You're reported to the state. You go in the database for the school district of the numbers of close contacts. However, you do not have to quarantine. So those are 2 different things. So quarantining is different than close contacts. You can be a close contact and not have to quarantine. So along the way, those 2 terms have kind of melded together, and so I just want to take a moment to separate them as they should be. Had some questions about this as well, about asymptomatic individuals and the 14-day requirement for quarantine. There's been quite a bit of questions about that. The reason for that is that Indiana code requires that public schools, public agencies follow the quarantine or contact tracing and quarantine requirements. They are not optional for public entities. And the code has been shared with us. This is an example. I'm not going to leave it up on the screen for a long time, but code 2026-56 gives the state health department the authority when a disease has been designated as a communicable disease to design quarantine methods, et cetera, around that communicable disease. So we are required to follow that law. 2 more Indiana codes, just adding to the screen. There's several that reference it in Indiana code that does not give public schools or public agencies, maybe, I'm not a lawyer, we have one sitting to my left, but maybe private agencies as well when it comes to quarantine, but certainly a public school has no choice in following those requirements. So wanted to share that with you today. And within that, we've seen some questions about school districts, other school districts in the state of Indiana. I just share this one as an example. This was an article, I think it was 2 or 3 days ago, that school district in the northeast corner of the state, where the school board was altering the length of quarantine of the students who were close contact. The health department reached out to them, not so gently, to remind them that you can go stricter than the state quarantine requirements and contact trace requirements. You cannot go less than the state requirements, and that's what this particular school board was reminded of last week. So we must follow this, and in that asymptomatic situation, there's been confusion around this because there's been different iterations of this decision tree that have floated around communities and been published in different ways that indicate a student could come back or staff member could come back prior to the 14 days if certain conditions are in place. And there's been some confusion that it only requires a negative test, and that is not the case. The reason that CDC has chosen the 14 days, I'm not an epidemiologist, but over that course of that 14 days, an individual can still become positive. So even if you have a negative test, say on day 7 or 8, there is a percentage of individuals that still can become positive after that negative test. So in order for us to allow a student to come back prior to the 14 days, an asymptomatic close contact, we have to impose what's called enhanced precautions in order to do that. And there's a whole list of them, and it's in a handout that the folks can grab here if they like. We have it on our website as well. I've listed that in my updates to parents, that those enhanced precautions must be in place in order for that student to come back early. One of those is that everybody must be masked 100% of the time, and the student cannot be within a certain distance of the individuals in a classroom. The student must be isolated when they eat lunch. You know, there's just a whole list of things that even in situations where masks are required of students and staff, in a school setting, virtually impossible to be able to create an enhanced precautions environment. So that is why we follow that rule. We follow the asymptomatic timeline for close contacts, because enhanced precautions is not something that we're able to successfully implement. I've had a lot of questions on that over the course of the last few weeks, so wanted to spend some time on that as well. I'm going to run through some data real quick for you. I've sent out updates to the community and families. So I've added some data this evening that's new. I took the data from yesterday. We were preparing for our meetings this evening, so this data tonight does not include today's data. It ended on yesterday. I want to take a second and talk about the data that I use for the updates that goes out to families versus the state health department dashboard. And then Mr. Martin puts together kind of a weekly dashboard of positive cases across the school district. And we've had some questions about why, if you do the math from those 3 locations, that it's off by 1 or 2. There's some reasons for that. One is that students might have been reported as a positive or a close contact, but the event did not take place in school. So whether a student is a school close contact or is not an in-school close contact could depend on which list that they're on. It also is very dependent on the time that you pull the data. There's always a data lag, so Mr. Martin might post his positive cases on Tuesday afternoon, and he's just gonna do it up to that date, and I'm gonna not have it on the parent update, but I can assure you that it's as clean as it can possibly be in trying to pull that at those different times. So there's might be some slight differences. Lots of categories here for you to consider. and look at. We have students who are excluded for any level, but you can see the blue is what it was on August 13th, the end of the first week of school, and the yellow indicates at the end of the day yesterday. So everything from elementary students excluded, middle school symptomatic, total excluded students. For symptomatic, you can see the blue and the yellow. So there's been increases in each of those lines over time. A little easier to read when I break it down by level. This is the high school. The blue bar is positive cases on August 13th. I'm sorry, it's positive cases. You can see the difference between August 13th and September 9th. The orange is excluded close contacts, and the gray are symptomatic. So you can see the difference between August 13th and September 9th.
And
high
that's
school.
on that day.
That's on that day, thank you,
cumulative
yes.
data.
Thank you, that's another question I've received. That is a snapshot in time. Mr. Martin and I look at that data, and with the health department, probably closer than other data points, because you could have 10 positive students identified on Thursday, and you could have 9 positive students that were designated positive a week or two ago that are returning. So the net is 1 positive student reported in that moment in time in the school. So from a principal standpoint, from a parent standpoint, what's happening at that school today and how many cases are in that school today is the data I'm sharing with families. This is the middle school, similar, slightly lower number of cases overall, but similar trend, as you can see. This is the elementary in aggregate. So these are all 4 of our elementaries combined. As you can see on the end of August, on August 13th, there were 0 positives. On the 9th, we had 3. So there's some difference there, but the close contacts and the symptomatic exclusions are the most prevalent there as well. I did go ahead and break some of the categories down to show the elementaries. You can see yellow is Hattie B. Stokes, gray is Central, orange is Perry Worth, blue is Harney. Stokes didn't exist on there on the top because they didn't have a positive on that particular date. So that's our positive cases at the elementary. You can see our close contacts at the elementary, August 13th versus September 9th, same trend as the middle school and high school. Symptomatic, you can see that as well, same trend overall in all 4 of our elementary schools. Mr. Martin worked very hard on this chart for us today, so thank him for that. These are also kind of snapshots in time, but he aggregated the data. There's been some questions both from the board and the community about that, so we've done it the best we can to show the number of instances over the course of the school year so far. 626 symptomatic instances all year as of yesterday. And then remember we talked about the snapshot in time where you have some students exiting and some students returning. That's what that second column is indicating. So that was the snapshot in time as of yesterday. We did add something because of the current governor's executive order, which we'll talk about in a moment. We actually added what it says close contact vaccinated and bus close contacts. So when the governor's order went into effect, because masks are required on buses, if the close contact originated on the bus, we do not have to quarantine that student now. So because it was a masked positive and a masked close contact. So we have stopped, since the governor's order went into effect, doing that. So we added that bus part of that row as well. I did put some caveats at the bottom because this is where the data doesn't always add up as well when folks are looking at 3 different charts. there's a lot of duplicates. It gets very tedious to try to ferret out all of the duplicates. For example, a symptomatic student could become positive, so now that student is in 2 categories. Or a student is symptomatic, well, you get the idea. It's close contact that turns positive. So now you have a close contact category. You could have a student who was a close contact at a certain point in a school year and then decides to get a vaccine, and now they're a close contact, but they're not contributing to the quarantine number because now they don't have to quarantine. So it can get very messy very, very quickly. But I think in a general sense, you can get an idea of how many instances. And if you look at the symptomatic, you look at the close contact, unvaccinated, those are the students, and the positive, those are the students that for at least a number of days, 10 to 14 typically, are not in school. So you multiply that times instructional time, then you can start looking at these numbers and what that means from students in school or not in school as well. So we will make this PowerPoint available here after the meeting, or it may already be, so folks can take a look. I mentioned the governor's executive order. Wanted to spend a couple minutes on that. There's a handout this evening for folks to pick up if they wish. And it explains it. Folks can read. I'm not going to read the executive order to them. But in essence, the governor gave authority to the Department of Health to modify close contact and quarantine requirements, and they did so. So the governor's order does not explicitly mention masks and face coverings, for example. It mentions authority to the health department to make those modifications, which they did, and that is depicted in this graph, in that at this point, if a positive COVID-19 case is masked and the close contact to that person is masked, there's no quarantine required, and there's no distance. There's no 3-foot distance or 6-foot distance. That's another piece that there's been some confusion about, is that when there's not a mask requirement, schools must use 6 feet radius from the positive student. So we've had some questions about why we're having more close contacts than last year. Last year we had a mask requirement, so we were able to use a 3-foot radius from a close contact student under the rules at that time. So that alone has the potential to double the number of close contacts that we have. So that 3-foot, 6-foot distance is big. Under this current order from the Department of Health, if the close contact is masked and the positive is masked, there's no quarantine and there's no stipulation in distance. This is based on, in part, on a large study that was shared recently from the Department of Health, studying like about almost 1 million students in a North Carolina study about masked and unmasked, and how the distance once those were masked did not show a significant difference in transmission. So it's based on those research study. So that's really all I had. I wanted to make that kind of clear about what the governor's order was, what it wasn't, a little bit about our data, the trends that we've seen over the course of the first 9 weeks of school, and then of course allow the board your time for discussion and consideration. So happy to answer any questions you might have and turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you. Questions and comments?
Yeah, I do have, and I informed all of you. I wanted to make a statement to the public today. I wrote out some thoughts, and tonight, as this school board is being charged with an extremely difficult decision, regarding the possibility of unprecedented policy changes. It's difficult. Despite being elected to this board during a pandemic, never in my wildest dreams did I ever think, or could I have imagined that I'd have to make a decision about the ongoing pandemic that will inevitably upset a portion of the people here and a portion of the community. I chose to run for this position because I believe in the next generation. Those who are currently enrolled in the school corporation and those who will be down the road. I believe that they are the future of our community, our county, our state, our nation, and our world. I also believe the school corporation in this city and in this community, I believe in it. We can be world changers together, collectively, if we band together and put our mind to it and commit to investing in the students that are contained within the walls of the Lebanon Community School Corporation. In every meeting that I've sat here since I was sworn in as a secretary, I've been charged, like I was today, with reading the mission statement of the school corporation. And I'll repeat that our corporation will cultivate and reach every student by influencing and enriching their lives through the power of education, and to do so in a positive and a safe learning environment. I'd like every individual in this room tonight to take a moment, look at your actions and the conversations you've had over the past week. And I ask you to evaluate ourselves against this very mission statement. Has this been the core of our conversations, of our social media posts, of our assumptions that we are making and stating on those social media posts, and our statements regarding the issues that we're here tonight to discuss? I want to assure to each and every one of you sitting in this room that that's been the very root of my thoughts and every independent conversation I've had with every one of these individuals here. The board isn't here out of selfish ambition or personal gain. That's not what we're here for. We're here because we care deeply for the next generation. Whether we are all unanimous of vote tonight or not, I can assure you that these individuals, they are here because they care about your children, your grandchildren, your students, and the future leaders of this community. And I'd be remiss if I didn't address some of the things that have really been on my heart and I've read as people shared some stuff that has been said and stated out there. Some of it just to set the things straight, but to also just get some truth out there. For those of you who took time to email us, I say thank you. We have personally read every email and we've taken it to heart. And early on when we were all sworn in, this board agreed that the best procedure for handling an email that came to all of us was to reply through our board president, Liz Keith. From the beginning, I felt that was a very good procedure, as it ensured that every email was being responded to, and it was being responded to consistently and effectively. So we didn't respond, the rest of us did not respond individually to every email, but Liz has. So I appreciate that, Liz, for doing that as well. We weren't ignoring those. And regarding some that might say that we are delaying our responsiveness to the governor's executive order, I'd like to publicly state that this board was first made note of this order the morning after it took place. He forwarded to us for all of us to read, digest independently. And we immediately began trying to find dates which our schedules met and could align, and we could legally meet together to discuss how this would affect the school corporation. Indiana state laws govern and create policies for which this board can meet together. And it's very strict in regards to the time necessary for us to meet and the time necessary for us to notify and publicize our meetings. And I'd like to remind you all that every member of this board also has full-time profession outside of this board. And so trying to find schedules to work on 5 individuals with family commitments and everything else to be able to get a quorum, it's difficult. So that the fact that this meeting is happening tonight on Friday night, not before, not after. It's due to our desire not to delay, or to avoid any discussions, but because we needed to coordinate our schedules and publicize the meetings. Some other school corporations were able to quickly make changes, but that was because previously they had provided authority to their superintendent to make changes like that. This board does not. We voted in policies at the beginning of the school year, and I don't believe that we want to put Dr. Millman into that situation where he has to make that decision. We were elected here to represent the varying makeup of this community and of the school corporation, and I think that we owe that to the citizens for us to be making that decision, not making him. For those of you who've used social media as a platform to cast negativity, spread erroneous claims, or generate anger toward this board or this community, I plead with you to stop. Over the past year, our nation has experienced unprecedented divisiveness, and we've witnessed terrible acts of hatred, retaliation, slander, uncontrolled violence between sectors that disagree with each other. Lebanon, we're better than this. We are above it. We don't always have to agree in order to act civilly towards one another. And over the past week, individuals have shared with me those statements that have been happening, and there's those untrue statements that I think that we again need to measure against our mission statement of that, are we creating a positive and safe learning environment? So I'm going to set some of those straight too. This board does not receive any benefits, insurance benefits, or anything for sitting on this board. We receive a very small stipend annually for the time that we are away from our jobs, away from our families, and that's it. We don't receive large amounts of monies for this. We haven't caved to any process or pressures of this one side of this argument or another because of political motivations. We're all elected to this in a nonpartisan election. Our administration, as Dr. Millman showed, has not been withholding information about COVID cases. At our first meeting of this year, which very few from the public attended, we voted on and passed a reentry plan that included details about the changes that we are going, and the processes that we are going to use to inform parents of COVID-19 positive cases in the schools. And regardless of the changes that may or may not be enacted tonight, our school corporation will be required to contract trace and report to the Indiana Department of Health. So the recent executive order from the governor only addresses the protocols of quarantining due to close contacts, and actually the Department of Health's orders have. It does not eliminate the requirement of tracking or reporting. There will be no cost savings, regardless of what decisions made tonight, because we're still going to be contract tracing. This board is made up of a diverse group of professionals. We are not health professionals. Therefore, we do our best to stay informed and keep up to date with ever-changing news, just like you might be, about COVID-19. Yet many, it seemed, think that we must be expected to know and understand every document currently circulating the world today about this terrible virus. And I think Teddy Roosevelt said it best when he said, "Do what you can with what you have where you are." Life is 10% what happens to you and 90% of how you react to it. We must indeed all hang together, or most assuredly we shall all hang separately. This board's intention is to make decisions with the information that we have and the conditions we have today. And we need to hang together even if we don't cast the same vote tonight, and we will. I'm confident of that. For those of you who have signed up to speak tonight, I ask that you consider all my above comments with integrity, honesty, and positivity towards this board and towards this administration. Understand that we should be talking about what's best for our children, not acting like children ourselves. For those of you who may walk away tonight disagreeing with the results of the decisions that might be made today or may not be made, please remember that this board is being asked to make a decision unlike we've ever had, have been trained to make. Therefore, we must cast our vote on what we believe most closely aligns with this board's mission based on the information that we've been provided. We are all members of this community. We must live together with this community, work together, worship together, grow together, and unify to build up and support, not tear down and confuse the students in our school corporation. As we said at the beginning of the school year when we adopted our reentry plan, no decision is final, and everything is going to be subject to change in this ever-changing world and virus. So that being said, I'd like to close my statement by asking you, our most important stakeholders, the parents, the grandparents, the siblings, and community leaders, all of you, for your commitment to adopt that mission statement and to fulfill that tonight. Please, Lebanon Community School Corporation, our corporation, your corporation, will cultivate and reach every student by influencing and enriching their lives through the power of education, and to do so in a positive and safe learning environment. So, thanks. Thanks for taking the time to listen.
Thank you very much. Very well said. And I know for myself that echoes a lot of the things that I have thought and felt in the last couple of weeks. So thank you for putting those thoughts together so succinctly. Thank you. Comments and questions about presentation or anything else you'd like to say? No, I would just say thank you very much for putting all this together. I think, you know, we can see that the trend is moving in a way we don't want it to, as far as kids being out of school. I will just add to what Mr. Park said too, when we're talking about our mission statement and why we're here. Our goal and our purpose is educating kids. And the best way to educate them is if they're in the building. So that's what I am keeping in mind as we discuss things. You know, parents who have lived through the virtual and the other options that have been out there can probably attest to the fact that a student in a classroom is the best scenario. At this point, Dr. Miller, did you have anything else to add to?
No, I don't. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay. All right. Well, next on our agenda is comments from the public, and we do have a number of people signed up. I know we have talked about this, that we do ask that you keep to a 3-minute limit, and we'll have a clock going. We do have several, and we would like you to please be respectful of the other speakers and allow everyone to have time to say what they would like to say today. And I will echo what Mr. Park said too, that if you could keep your tone civil and informative, that would be great. It is not a time to quiz or engage with the board. We will listen to your comments, we'll take notes. If there's a way that we would follow up with you later, that's great. But this really is a time for you to make a statement. All right, so we will just start down the list. Dr. Hornbecker. Oh, and we would ask that you state your name and your address, please, before you speak.
My name is Dr. Michael Hornbecker. I live at 101 North Muirfield Circle here in Lebanon. I come to speak to you this evening as a concerned citizen, as a practicing physician in this community, and as a proud LCSC parent. I've also come here tonight to speak in support of a universal masking policy for all students, staff, and visitors at LCSC schools. The facts surrounding the need for this policy are quite simple. Number one, thanks to the Delta variant, COVID-19 is once again spreading rapidly across our community, and it is not sparing our children. In Indiana, since July 1st, cases in the 0 to 18 age group have risen 3,000%. As August ended, nearly 1 in 3 new COVID-19 cases in Indiana was in a child. Pediatric hospitalizations in our state have soared from 35 in June to 156 in August. Here in Boone County, in the 0 to 18 age group, we had 25 positive cases in June, 24 positive cases in July, and 172 positive cases in August. Number 2, COVID-19 affects our children's ability to attend in-person school. Thanks to the data provided by Dr. Millman, we know that hundreds of students have been in quarantine, out of school, for 10 to 14 days due to current guidelines. Each of these quarantines represents a missed educational opportunity, a frustrated parent having to take time off work to care for their child, and an additional burden on our teachers as they attempt to simultaneously meet the educational needs of children in the classroom and children at home. Number 3, masking works. Despite muddled messaging from the CDC and volumes of misinformation on the internet, there exists a growing body of research that demonstrates the effectiveness of mask wearing in helping to slow the spread of COVID-19. I can't detail these studies in the allotted time, so I'll refer you to the links that I emailed to each one of you to the articles that go over this data. Number 4, several days ago, the Indiana Department of Health issued new guidance for masking and quarantine in our schools. I won't go through that because Dr. Millman already explained it, but suffice it to say that these new guidelines are in keeping with quarantine guidelines from the CDC, and they provide our schools the means to avoid removing unvaccinated students from the learning environment simply because they were exposed to COVID-19 positive individuals. In conclusion, members of the board, I implore you to vote tonight to institute a policy of universal masking within our school corporation. In doing so, you will be voting to help slow the spread of COVID-19 in our schools and in our community, to make our schools safer places for our children to congregate and learn, to support our teachers as they endeavor to give each child equal opportunities for education, to support parents who are exasperated at the prospect of having to take more time off from their jobs to care for quarantined children, and finally, you'll be voting to ensure that our students stay where they belong, learning with their peers and their teachers in the classroom. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next is Natalia Agudelo. I'm sorry if I did not pronounce that correctly. I got the Natalia right.
Hello, my name is Natalia Agudelo. I live in 1740 Westwit, and that's here in Lebanon. It's kind of hard to follow Dr. Hornbecker. He has all the facts for what I want to say. All I ask of you guys is please leave aside personal feelings or science, and let's just keep our children in school. I know, like you said, it is very difficult for a child to learn while at home, and also for parents to be able to take days off. I myself, as a labor and delivery nurse at St. Vincent's, I have floated over to the ICU taking care of pregnant women. We are no longer seeing only the sick and the elderly get sick. We are seeing people our age and children. I have to wear a mask 12 hours a day, and we don't complain. We know we do it to protect ourselves and to protect our patients, and I ask that you guys keep that into consideration. We want our kids in school. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick Elmore.
My name is Patrick Elmore. I live at 4665 Indigo Blue Boulevard in Whitestown. As we all know, hospitalization rates amongst children for COVID-19 are exceptionally low. The actual risk from a health perspective to children is very low. It seems like the issue being addressed is not due to students and staff getting seriously ill. So maybe the issue being addressed here with a masking policy is the major disruption for the student body as a whole due to missed time, due to the quarantine requirements. So based on some quick calculations with your updated numbers, there have been 26 days of school. You got about 3,500 students, that's about 91,000 student days. If you've had, I believe you said 400 total close contact, unvaccinated quarantine requirements, that's going to work out to about 4.4% of total student days missed. That's not great. That's not ideal. But that hardly seems like an issue that would warrant taking continued action that will undoubtedly have a long-term negative psychological effect on our children. By instituting a masking policy, continuing to do that, you'd be advocating for a policy that we should continue to send our children the message that the air is toxic and that everybody is sick. and that simply existing and breathing is inherently dangerous. Is this a lesson that you want to teach our children? I don't.
Thank you. Tanya Kammerer.
Good evening. My name is Tanya Kimmer. I live at 100 Terrace Court in Lebanon. I'm the mother of 2 children, one of which is immune compromised. It is a fact, statistically proven, that children with Down syndrome are 3 times more likely to be hospitalized from COVID-19. This is a difficult decision for all of you and for all of us as community members, and I know that does not come easy. I just ask that you keep our children in school, but more importantly, that you mask them because it works. And you all did such an exceptional job last year, and I thank you for that. I sent a thank you note to the communications director in August of 2020 saying so because our children were in school all but 1 week last year, and it didn't harm them psychologically to wear a mask. So I thank you for what you're doing here tonight, and I ask that you protect them, that you continue to protect them and protect their health. And I'm just coming at that from as a mother, primarily of a child who is most compromised and in one of your schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan Jones. Susan Jones. Not here? Anyone? Okay, we will move on. Alyssa Wilborn.
Hi, my name's Alyssa Wilborn. It's 1535 Clear Vista Drive. So I guess I'm here mainly for the fact that I think a lot of parents are resorting to the mask because they don't want to quarantine the kids. Obviously, keeping the kids in school is ideal, and that's what everybody wants. We know that them being isolated and quarantined is just furthering this whole, depression and suicide that's happening with the kids being at home for half the school year last year and being isolated from parents. So with that being said, I guess I would say that the other, issues, so then we go to mask. If we think that the mask is going to work, then perhaps. But the mask does work with, particles that are what it was made for, the droplets, right? But we know that this virus is an aerosol. And so it is actually 500 times smaller than a piece of dust. So you can't even see the virus. It's an aerosol. Stays in the air for up to 50 days, and that's without circulation. So typically when you're circulating air, you're moving it through and it's not going to stay in the air. But the point being is that if you can put a piece of hair through the side of your mask, you have mitigated that mask to work. So once there's a gap in that mask, and we say, well, the mask worked 5 to 10%. So with that being said, as soon as there's a gap, there's nothing that's going to protect you against that aerosol virus. And I did forward and email you guys some information from an actual industrial hygienist, not related to dental. It's actually his field of expertise. He has actually testified on people's behalf for this reason. So my other concern is that these kids that have already had the virus, they're not getting any credit for, like, okay, well, then you don't need a mask or you don't need to be quarantined. You've already had it. And it's like, that's just not getting looked at. And so I guess I would like to say, when do we get to acknowledge natural immunity from the virus itself? And then I guess, I mean, there was quite a few things, and I guess I'll just probably end up emailing them. But I think at the end of the day, if you really think your kid's going to die without wearing this mask or from this virus, then maybe just don't rely on that mask to keep your kid alive. Because it's a cold virus. Stop tracking it and leave it up to the parents. It's the parents' decision. That's it.
Thank you. Carmel Ferris.
Hi, I'm Carmel Ferris, and I have two daughters. One is in elementary, and one is in high school. And
State your address, please.
oh, you need my address. Okay, 3140 Middle Jamestown Road.
Okay, thank you.
I have one daughter at Central and one that attends here, and I just feel like it should be a parent's choice. All kids are different. All kids handle this differently. My grade school child, it gives her a lot of anxiety. She gets migraines, which she always has, but that just intensified it. And I noticed like little quirks with her, like she'd hold her breath, and then she was holding it all day in the mask. So then she would make it a habit. And, you know, the first day of school, I said, "How was school?" And she said, "It was great. I could breathe and I could play with my friends. And we weren't zoned." I mean, that's just heartbreaking to hear from, fourth grader now. I just don't want my kids living in fear. And I respect parents that want their kids to wear a mask, but I just want the choice to pick what's best for my child. And, you know, I understand there are kids who have, you know, things where they autoimmune issues, and I respect those parents too. But I just would want them to respect my decision too for my child. And I always try to teach my kids, like if we are places, to social distance, because I don't make them mask when we go out places. I hate the divide with everybody, and I think I respect everybody, but I want my kids to live a normal life, and this is going to be around. I mean, this is something that's not going to go away. I don't believe that it will. More kids die of the flu every year. There's been CDC released information that as of September 8th, unfortunately, 8 children have died. 8. I just don't think we should make this their issue, because we all know that children do not get ill from this. Terribly ill. Very, very little. And it's not fair to them. I mean, doing this to them, I just feel like we're taking away their youth. And I know they're our future, and I don't want them being fearful, unsocial, distance from everybody, you know. Like my daughter said, my teacher hugged me today. I mean, how sad. Little kids look up to their teachers, you know. And I don't want my kid to be awkward and distant and scared of life. So that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jonathan Jonathan Adams.
Jonathan Adams, live at 924 North Jameson Street. Just real quick, I want to speak to the fact, I guess it's a community school corporation, and nobody is saying that parents cannot send their kids without masks. If you want to send your kid with a mask, then that's perfectly acceptable. I think as the school board, I think it's important to look at, when given the choice of masking or not masking, when parents are given the choice, you go through the schools, walk through the schools, very few are wearing a mask. And I think it's just important to let the parents make that decision instead of a school board. Thank you.
Shelby Haas. Shelby, sorry.
Hello. Shelby Haas, 3352 Firethorn Drive. It's in Whitestown. I did email you guys earlier, again, kind of stating my opinion on this, but I do appreciate that you guys gave us the choice this year, and I really wish that you guys continue on with that. I've weighed the risks with my kids. I have a 3rd grader and a 1st grader, and I believe that they're very, very, very low risk of this. I understand there's other people on the other side of it. My son, the one that I'm really kind of advocating for, he had 2 months cut short of his preschool, and he already had speech issues. 1st grade, he didn't even get put into speech until I think November. And then he wore a mask all year. So there's still issues. I mean, I still kind of struggle to listen to him sometimes. He has to repeat things, and I just don't like prolonging that. My issue with us masking up again is I want to know that there's an end sometime. Right now there's a vaccine that people can choose to get or not get for 12 to 17, and there's already people that are reluctant to even get that. And so even if they were to put forward the vaccine for, under 12, I really expect a lot more people to be reluctant for that as well. So how many years in a row are we going to do this is my question. I know we're reevaluating, we're looking at the data as it goes. Any virus, they fluctuate. A lot of times they'll peak and they'll go down. And I really think that we're right on the cusp of that. Just looking at the data, kind of keeping up with it. To me, I mean, I'm not a doctor, of course, but I do understand immunity. You do see a decline. And I really think that if we kind of continue on with the plan that we're doing, that we're going to eventually see the numbers drop. And there's people that are going to argue the other way, but that's just my opinion. So I really just ask that you guys continue on with the plan that we started the year with, and don't make any changes, drastic changes tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I will call again for Susan Jones. She had signed up to speak, but has not come forward. If you're here and would like to, you're welcome to. Okay, that is the end of the list of people who had signed up to speak. Thank you all very much who came and spoke for doing that this evening. I know that's not always a comfortable thing to do. We appreciate your input very much. All right. Okay, so as far as our practices and procedures, I think Dr. Milliman, whew, easy for me to say, laid out very well what is within the board's authority and what is not. We can't change the close contacting rules. I think, that is something that is understood now. But we do have the opportunity to change some of these other mitigation factors, including masks. So that is something that the board has been given the authority to do. I will add, we did have an executive session, which I think you're all aware, to talk about school safety in terms of the virus prior to this meeting, and we had Dr. Surveys and Lisa Yantz from the Boone County Health Department here presenting to us. And you know, the data that they presented is a very steep incline in cases in Boone County right now. So the viruses do ebb and flow. We are in an upward, they're numbers, you know, we're not making that up. That's something that you can see. You know, we would be glad to share with you the information that they shared with us. There are charts that are readily available that show that the virus is in an upswing right now. We can see from Dr. Milliman's presentation that our instances of kids not being able to be present in school for whatever the reason, because it is complicated, but the end result, not being able to be in school, is increasing. We're moving in the wrong direction right now. And we can't educate kids effectively and do our best job if they're not in the building. So I don't know what other comments you would like to make. Everyone's obviously welcome to share their views.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that, you know, as a board, we pay attention to the data that the health professionals provide us, because we are not doctors, we are not nurses, we are not in the medical field. And, you know, like Craig said, we are advancing the mission of this school corporation, and we are thinking of all the students. Yes, there'll be exceptions to every policy that we have in the 400-page handbook. There are exceptions to all of those policies. So we know that, you know, whatever is decided tonight, there will be exceptions to the policies. We will work with parents and other staff, whatever we need to do. But we're thinking of the school corporation as a whole right now. We're thinking of all the students as a whole, all the staff. And, you know, we rely on the information that we're given, and that's how we make decisions, not from what we want to personally see happen or what our kids want to see happen who live in our households, but on the data that we are given that we think is important and that we trust. So I think Craig said it very well that, you know, each of us on this school board is striving our best to fulfill the mission of the school corporation. And hopefully you've seen that tonight here, just in people talking and in the data that you've been presented. And, you know, some people may not choose to believe the data. That is up to you. I cannot control whether or not you believe data, but we take it into consideration when we consider any policy that we're writing. You know, facts and figures are important. So that's how we are trying to make our decisions to, you know, strengthen the school corporation however we can.
To me, the one piece of data, I am not a doctor, so I have to rely on their professionalism. But the one piece of data that I keep hearing is the data about the success of children advancing their education by being in a school. And I want to do whatever is going to get as many children in the school as possible so they can get an education. That's, again, what my goal on this board is, to make sure and to ensure that as many children, students, get an education. And so we have 2 semesters of data right here that shows that children fell behind because of remote, because of being absent. They aren't able to get the instruction that face-to-face instruction provides. So that ultimately is that what is weighing on me as I look at this decision.
And someone mentioned mental health. As a mental health professional, I would agree that our students need to be around their peers. They need to be around caring and concerned adults, and that's what you find in the schools. So from a mental health perspective, I think it is important to keep school open.
And I must also say, it is a concern to me also of those children who do have learning disabilities that need there needs to be some type of concessions, and concessions, I don't know, or some arrangements with them. I strongly believe that is true, and that I believe in our administration, our principals, our teachers, that they can successfully do that and adapt to those children who have known, who have issues, if we were to pass this mandate.
No, I think that's important to remember, because just the range of needs and issues, we're talking about everything from a 5-year-old to an 18-year-old. So there is no perfect answer that perfectly fits the kindergarten or the middle school or the high schooler. There just isn't, and we have toiled over this. But to Mr. Park's point, and I believe you said it as well, Mrs. Hutchison, too, we do make exceptions to policies. We do accommodate individual students as those needs come up. Shelby, you make a perfect argument with your son and the development that he has missed and he's gaining, and those, we can't name all of those scenarios because we don't know all of them. That's what plays out on a building level when parents and kids work with their teachers and their administrators to work out a good plan. So that happens in terms of any policy.
I would just say thank you to everybody coming out. Obviously, it's a very controversial topic. Nobody's always going to agree, and that's okay. Mr. Parks hit it right on the head. How we, adapt from here and move on, whatever the decision may be, I think speaks volumes about our community. Thank you for coming in.
And thank you for all who spoke, for keeping it nice.
Thank you.
All right, I move that effective September 15th and through October 22nd, 2021, LCSC amend our current COVID-19 safety procedures to require masks or face coverings to be worn by all staff and students regardless of vaccine status while indoors in all school facilities. This motion directs the administration to create guidelines and procedures that provide necessary support for students and staff who may have special circumstances. And then at our regular October 22nd board meeting, we will review all the current and relevant COVID data and make a decision then whether or not to extend the mask mandate policy, remove it, or modify it.
October 19th.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, sorry.
So let me ask, did you have an end date on the policy itself?
October 22nd.
Okay, sorry, I'm thinking as I'm listening.
That's okay.
Okay. I will second that motion.
Mrs. Keith, I do need to make one comment.
Sure.
Under Indiana law, changes in working conditions for your certified teaching staff must be discussed meaningfully with the Teachers Association prior to implementation of changes in those working conditions. So if you're thinking about imposing a mask requirement on your teaching staff, before you implement that and actually would adopt that requirement, you do have to go through that discussion process so they have the opportunity to weigh in with their comments, pro and con, or the details of how it might work, where they have to wear the mask and what kind of mask they might have to wear and so forth. So, as I was anticipating your discussion tonight, there really wasn't a lot of conversation about the staff being impacted or requirement. And I'm not saying it shouldn't be, I think it makes sense that it would.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't do that without going through that association discussion process. You can do it for students and you can do it for visitors without that discussion. So just think through that as you decide what sort of timeline you want to be on.
Ask the question if that motion would be somehow amended to, with the certified staff saying, subject to all necessary discussions taking place prior to September 15th. Would that suffice if it was worded in the motion?
It might. It would really be up to the teachers.
Yeah, they still have to be able to-
They have the right, the courts have ruled that they have the right to meaningful
Correct.
input. And if you say we're adopting this rule, it's gonna take effect next Thursday, but we will talk to you beforehand.
Right, understood.
Somebody might say that's not meaningful input, that's after the fact, covering your hind end, so to speak. So, I don't know whether the Teachers Association would object and say that we did not have meaningful input. They might very well agree that it's a wise move and they had meaningful input before Dr. Milliman comes up with protocols and exceptions and so forth. But I can't speak for them.
What do you suggest then?
I would
Say classified
I would
staff?
suggest that if you're ready to make a motion along the lines that was just proposed, you limit it to students and visitors, and you can express
Classified staff, perhaps?
classified staff are not subject to those rules, so you the same for classified staff, your secretaries, your bus drivers, your cafeteria workers, etc. You can impose those rules without discussion with the association, and then direct the superintendent to engage that process, and then you can amend the motion as to when it would take effect as to them after they've had an opportunity to weigh in.
And what kind of time frame will we anticipate that needing, Dr. Milliman?
I mean, I would anticipate that Mrs. Boyette would be eager to meet and assemble her team. So I would, I can't
Sure.
predict her calendar, but I would be hopeful, that we would have that completed by the 15th as part of the motion. That's why I was asking kind of for the suggestions, but we can't assume that that's going to work on their behalf, or that they would consider that to be meaningful discussion based on that timeline. So I'm struggling with how to phrase that particular
So
language.
in effect, would this need to be two separate policies that,
Perhaps.
Well, the policy that you're going to take action on tonight is a policy in relation to students, perhaps, classified staff, and visitors. And then you can amend the policy later to include teaching, a certified teaching staff, if that's what the product of the discussion exercise would be.
There's discussion scheduled for Thursday next week.
There is, yeah.
Which would be prior to the next board meeting.
that's what I was wondering, if that could be included, and then prior to our meeting on the 21st, that could be a decision made,
Yeah.
input from them
Yes,
at
for
that
sure.
point.
Yes.
Yeah, as I understand it, the board is going to have to charge the superintendent with coming up with some protocols and some exceptions and some procedures before this policy actually takes effect.
Mhm.
I just wanted to make it clear, your thoughts, your desire to impose that sort of a requirement on your teaching staff you need to recognize that you have to listen to them first. And if you've already decided it, then we're going to go talk to them, somebody is going to say, the teaching staff, not the public at large, they would not have a say in that, but the teaching staff could kick back and say, we were excluded from this conversation and we don't like it. And a court could say you can't impose that requirement on teachers without having gone through that discussion first. So that's all I'm saying. We have to jump through that hoop as well.
Okay. Then we need to do this in 2 steps. So, would you like to amend your motion to
Yes, I
exclude
amended
certified
to
staff?
say, I move that effective September 15th and through October 22nd, 2021, LCSC amend our current COVID-19 safety procedures to require mask or face coverings to be worn by all classified staff, visitors, and students regardless of vaccine status while indoors in all school facilities. This motion directs the administration to create guidelines and procedures that provide necessary support for students and classified staff who may have special circumstances. That's motion number one.
And would direct him to discuss
Oh, okay, I didn't have them here.
mask mandate with the certified staff.
Liz?
Yes.
We're gonna do that second motion tonight, we're gonna do that on the 21st.
Mhm.
And you don't know that, so you do the second motion tonight.
Okay, so for clarity's sake, just leave that out
Okay.
tonight.
Yep.
Could you read that one more time? Sorry.
Yes, I will be glad to. I move that effective September 15th and through October 22nd, 2021, LCSC amend our current COVID-19 safety procedures to require masks or face coverings to be worn by all classified staff, visitors, and students regardless of vaccine status while indoors in all school facilities. This motion directs the administration to create guidelines and procedures that provide necessary support for students and classified staff who may have special circumstances.
I will second that motion. Is there any further discussion on that? Okay, we will vote on the motion at hand. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Motion passes 3-1. And that is all the business we have on our agenda this evening. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Sorry about that, Jerry.
I don't know. Just-
Yes. We talked to the health department about that. So what they said, and they said, basically, yes, we could work with different families and different students to work out plans. My understanding to accommodate mine as well. And I'm trying to think if that was actually in there.
Did not mention that in our
Presentation or not, because that was a question that we had.
That's why
It was.
I got an attorney. I don't know.
Kind of act in good faith maybe is the best answer, you know, if kids need to see it, or maybe, you know, kids who need a clear mask. Do we allow for clear masks, or, you know, the teachers have a clear mask? So that's part of what we are asking Dr. Milliman and the administrators to do, is lay out these guidelines. Because we started talking about all the different exceptions that can happen, all the different things that we can't predict, all the everything. So that's why we went that direction and said, come up with the guidelines. But I would encourage you to talk to your son's teacher, talk to the building principal, because we want to be.
Hey, sir.
Wow.
No, I got you.
And that's a perfect example of where this is a child who's obviously, you know, medically documenting this. So, any policy, you can have exceptions and things like that. So, that's why it was but anyway, we can still try out. You know, we can still do those things where, you know, I asked Dr. Servies if, you know, if kids could. If they're in a room, 5 kids in a room, the teacher's 8 or the teacher, and they're spread out. You know, is that okay? Yes, because they're spread out. So those are things we're gonna have to figure out. So,
Well, I mean, we go by the data that is
it is the Friday before fall break. And we have a board meeting already scheduled. Our monthly meeting is on the 19th, which is the Tuesday prior. So we will discuss how it's going, what the numbers look like. And, you know, maybe at that point, you know, what we're hearing from the health department is that like Delta may be coming down.
Maybe those orders changed.
Well, I work
Yes.
too, I work in
And
this
just thought,
Oh, we're still live.